What's up, guys? This is Hayden Schaap. Welcome back to my quick study of the 7 habits of highly effective people. I'm gonna continue this study today just because I want to be consistent. But my wife and I are in Orlando, and I got to go to. I don't have to go. I am here on taking my wife on a surprise trip to go to Universal Studios. So I'm going to choose to do this quickly so that we can go to that right now. But I wanted to be consistent, so I'm going to share just a little bit about my study from continuing the 7 habits of highly effective people. We talked a little bit last time about the difference between being reactive versus proactive and how you can identify how reactive or proactive you are based on the language that you use. So I just want to do a quick little summary of this. A serious problem with reactive language is that it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. This is really interesting. And one of the things that I wanted to point out was I'm also at the same time, I'm kind of simultaneously studying Think and Grow Rich. I read Think and Grow Rich about once a month right now. Yeah, right now it's really about once a month. And so I wanted to show you just one of the cool things that I've been learning in Think and Grow Rich that goes along with this idea of language. The language that we use that's most dominating in our mind actually becomes the language that is a self-fulfilling prophecy. So in this section in Think and Grow Rich, where he talks about how you can increase your own faith or belief in your ability to attain the things that you want. And this book is centered on, he talks mostly about like riches and money, but he prefaces at the beginning of the book that Think and Grow Rich refers to richness in everything. And he was a very God-fearing man, which is kind of cool. Napoleon Hill. So this is a cool thing I'm going to point out. All thoughts which have been emotionalized or given feeling, I'm pretty sure he makes up the word emotionalized, but I use it a lot. So hopefully it's actually in a dictionary somewhere. Or given feeling, all thoughts which have been emotionalized or given feeling and mixed with faith begin immediately to translate themselves into their physical equivalent or counterpart. The emotions or the feeling portion of thoughts are the factors that give thoughts vitality, life, and action. And emotions of faith, love, and then he also talks about the emotions of sex, which is kind of interesting just because it's a powerful emotion. When mixed with any thought impulse, give it greater action than any of these emotions can do singly. Not only thought impulses which have been mixed with faith, but also those have been mixed with any of the positive emotions or any of the negative emotions may reach and influence the subconscious mind. This is really interesting because, so then he talks about how many people believe themselves doomed to poverty and failure because of some strange force which they believe they have no control over. They're creatures of their own misfortunes, which this is one of the things that Covey talks about is like, in order to change your circumstances, you have to recognize that you are the one making yourself a creature of those circumstances through the thoughts and the words that dominate your mind, and then make themselves into reality by you speaking them, and even worse if you're writing them. They're the creators of their own misfortunes because of the negative belief which is picked up by the subconscious mind and translated into their physical equivalent. I have some thoughts on how this works scientifically, because I don't think it's maybe as mystical as how it's often perceived, like in I hate The Secret and all that crap. But I think this is really interesting, and I actually think that there's some neuroscience to back up some of these ideas. And I'll talk about them more on another time, but this is an appropriate place at which to suggest again that you may benefit by passing on to your subconscious mind any desire that you wish translated into its physical or monetary equivalent in a state of expectancy or belief that the transmutation will actually take place. Transmute meaning to really transform or take something in one form and make it into another form. Trans means across, mutate means to change. Your belief or faith is the element that determines the action of your subconscious mind. There is nothing to hinder you from deceiving your subconscious mind when giving it instructions through autosuggestion. And autosuggestion is a cool term we can touch on another time. But as I deceived my son's subconscious mind, he talks about how his son was born a deaf mute, and he said, I'm not going to have a son who's a deaf mute. I'm going to will him to be able to hear understand and speak, and he did. One of the only person in the world at the time that had discovered how to do so, and that later became the process by which you can help someone go from being a deaf mute to actually speaking. And that was then widely applied in the science of his day for others in the same situation, which is really fascinating. To me, let's see here, this is interesting. So to make this deceit more realistic, so basically he's saying if you want something, you have to make these thoughts so emotional that they then act themselves out into reality. Or in other words, you begin to take something, a conscious emotionalized thought, and through repetition ingrain that within the habitual part of your brain, so that it becomes something that you are consistently acting upon subconsciously. And Covey this is why he called his book The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, because the idea is to take a conscious desire to be the type of person that is embodied within the 7 habits of highly effective people, and to make those attributes habitual so that you're acting them out subconsciously, so that it's a natural reaction of the way that you live to be that type of person, rather than having to constantly think about making decisions and then therefore be bogged down by that decision fatigue to embody those attributes. So to make this deceit more realistic, conduct yourself just as you would if you were already in possession of the material thing which you are demanding. When you call upon your subconscious mind, the subconscious mind will transmute into its physical equivalent by the most direct and practical media available any order given to it in a state of belief or faith that the order will be carried out. Surely enough, has been stated to give a starting point from which one may, through experiment and practice, acquire the ability to mix faith with any of the other given, with any order given to the subconscious mind. Perfection will come through practice, and it cannot be merely by reading instructions. If it is true that one may become a criminal by association with crime, it is equally true that one may develop faith by voluntary suggestion to the subconscious mind that one has faith. The mind comes finally to take on the nature of the influences that dominate it. Again, this is so I'm only pointing out a practical, what I think is a practical explanation as to why Covey says that, and why that it is true that our thoughts and words become self-fulfilling prophecy, be they positive or negative. But the most powerful thoughts that dominate our mind and our words become self-fulfilling prophecy. The mind comes finally to take the nature of the influences that most dominate it. Understand this truth, and you will know why it is essential for you to encourage the positive emotions as dominating forces of your mind, and discourage and eliminate the negative emotions. A mind dominated by positive emotions becomes a favorable abode for the state of a mind known as faith. A mind so dominated may at will give the subconscious mind's instructions, which it will accept and act upon immediately. And again, I think there's actually even more practical explanation scientifically for why this happens. Oddly enough, I actually think a lot of the current neuroscience that's coming out would support some of these claims. But again, I'd love to dive into that another time. And I'd actually love to talk to Andrew Huberman about this stuff, because I have some ideas or thoughts as to why this takes place based off of the things that he is teaching currently. Who's a neuroscience scientist at Stanford. But I don't think it's as mystical as this, but I think Napoleon Hill was onto something in the way he was explaining it, given the resources and the science and knowledge that he had. The whole idea here being that our words and thoughts become self-fulfilling prophecy, because just as Napoleon Hill says, and as Covey will say, he will even talk about visualization and how one of the essential aspects of being able to visualize in order to create a new habit is the power of emotion. And so the most emotionalized or feeling-based thoughts that dominate our mind and that are spoken into reality are the things that actually make their way into reality and become self-fulfilling prophecies, which is just, gosh, it's so fascinating. Okay, so let's go back to just 7 habits here and finish up. Where are we? Where is 7 habits? This guy? Yeah, okay, so excuse me, I'm gonna make this a little bit bigger here. Um, a serious problem with reactive language is that it becomes self-fulfilling prophecy. People become reinforced in the paradigm that they are determined, and they produce evidence to support that belief. And I think it's the same with like any of the positive emotions as well. In the great literature of all progressive societies, love is a verb, and we talked a little bit about that last time too. I think that's really an interesting idea, how you can tell how a society, whether they are more reactive or proactive in nature, based on their views of determinism and really the language that dominates that society, right? So now we're going to just get a tiny bit into the circle of influence versus the circle of concern. So circle of concern, circle of concern versus circle of influence. Another excellent way to become more self-aware regarding our own degree of proactivity is to, and really you have to become self-aware of your own proactivity, how proactive or reactive you are. And really, like I was saying last time, the best way to do that is to identify the language that you're using. And if you just recorded yourself all day long, had someone transcribe what you were saying all day, you'd know whether you were proactive or reactive based on that language. We each have a wide range of concerns. So another excellent way to become more self-aware regarding our own degree of proactivity is to look at where we focus our time and energy. We each have a wide range of concerns: our health, our children, problems at work, national debt, nuclear war. We could separate those things. We could separate from those things in which we have no particular mental or emotional involvement by creating a circle of concern. This is the very reason that I don't watch the news. And you might say, like, well, how are you supposed to know like how to act in the world if you don't know what's going on in the world? Well, I don't currently believe that I have any affecting the world at large is in my circle of concern mainly. The only things that are in my circle of influence are how I behave as a person and the people that I influence in my own circle. And to the extent that I can control and make decisions within that, starting with myself, then more and more people will be influenced around me until it maybe even one day would reach a point to where I could influence masses at large. But that's the only way that happens is by making decisions within your circle of influence first, and then broadening that circle of influence. Trying to make decisions outside of that circle of influence is, I think, a recipe for a lot of frustration and contention, really. As we look at those things within our circle of concern, it becomes apparent that there are some things over which we have no real control and others we can do something about. We could identify those concerns in the latter group by circumscribing them with a smaller circle of influence. So a proactive focus, which is a positive energy, enlarges a circle of influence. By determining which of these two circles is the focus of most of our time and energy, we can discover much about our degree of proactivity. Proactive people focus on their efforts on the circle of influence, the things they can actually influence. They work in those things. They work on those things they can do something about. The nature of their energy is positive, enlarging, magnifying, causing their circle of influence to increase. Reactive people, on the other hand, focus their efforts on the circle of concern. They focus on the weaknesses of other people, the problems in the environment, the circumstances over which they have no control. Their focus results in blaming and accusing attitudes, reactive language, and increased feelings of victimism. It's crazy. I think the people who are most victimized by their circumstances, it's really because they're most dependent on the things around them. And so they actually, that's why they base their emotional lives on the things outside of them, because they're taking no control for any of the things they probably could, relinquishing their ability to by giving it to their circle of concern through their lack of proactivity, their dependency on it. Their focus results in blaming and accusing attitudes, reactive language, and increased feelings of victimization. The negative energy generated by that focus, combined with neglect in areas they could do something about, causes their circle of influence to shrink. Fascinating. Fascinating. Okay, so as long as we are working within our circle of concern, we empower the things within it to control us. We aren't taking the proactive initiative necessary to affect positive change. Earlier, I shared with you the story of my son who is having serious problems in school. Sandra and I were deeply concerned about his apparent weaknesses and about the way other people were treating him. But those things were in our circle of concern. As long as we focus our efforts on those things, we accomplish nothing except to increase our own feelings of inadequacy and helplessness and to reinforce our son's dependence. It was only when we went to work in our circle of influence, when we focused on our own paradigms, that we began to create a positive energy that changed ourselves and eventually influenced our son as well. By working on ourselves instead of worrying about conditions, we were able to influence the conditions. That is so, I mean, that's just, it's like amazing, right? How would life be if anytime you were frustrated with someone, you just asked yourself, what thing am I doing in my own life that's making me frustrated with this person? And then evaluated like your own circle of influence, how you saw that person, the things that you were doing in that relationship that you could, help to change it, etc. It was only when we went to work in our circle of influence, when we focused on our own paradigms, that we began to create a positive energy that changed ourselves and eventually influenced our son as well. By working on ourselves instead of worrying about conditions, we were able to influence those conditions because of positive wealth role, or because of, excuse me, here's my dyslexia added again. And I haven't read this part in a minute. So anytime I haven't read, in words, like with my eyes, a part of a book in a while, then it's almost as if I'm reading it anew, and my reading disability comes in pretty hardcore. But here we go. Because of position, wealth, role, or relationships, there are some circumstances in which a person's circle of influence is larger than his or her circle of concern. That is interesting. So that you actually do grow your ability to control almost as much as possible, but that also can actually be a bad thing. The situation reflects a self-inflicted emotional myopia, another reactive, selfish lifestyle focused on the circle of concern. This is kind of interesting too. Though they may have to prioritize the use of their influence, proactive people have a circle of concern that is at least as big as their circle of influence, accepting the responsibility to use their influence effectively. So someone in this position might be like a celebrity who actually has a lot of control over their influence, yet and makes decisions within that circle of influence through a reach in media or like vast wealth, but they don't have control over their own personal lives. So they're inside dependent people and insecure because of that dependency. And so that's actually even more dangerous. I think a lot of tyrants have been in that situation, I would imagine. People who gain power but don't have any power over their own personal lives, and so therefore wreak havoc in the decisions that they make that influence people around them, which is kind of an interesting idea. I've never thought of it that way before. That's fascinating. Okay, I'm gonna go because Sarah is ready, and we're gonna go to the park now. But thanks guys for watching whenever this releases, and if you liked any of this stuff, comment the things that you're learning with me. If not, I don't really care. I don't care if anybody is watching this or not, because I'm doing this study for myself. So hopefully if you did join along, you enjoyed, and I'll talk to you guys soon.